Hello, 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 and welcome to episode 190 of the Mo Money Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Morelos. Thanks for joining me for another episode. This one's going to be a good one. I'm going to be talking to John David Mann. He's an award-winning author. I mean, it's a crazy bio. He has co-authored books that have sold more than 3 million copies, including best-selling classic The Go-Giver with Bob Burg and the New York Times best-selling memoir The Red Circle with former Navy SEAL Brandon Webb. Also crazy, he's an award-winning composer and cellist, and he's an entrepreneur and author. He has a book called Take the Lead with former White House staffer Betsy Myers, and which was named by Tom Peters in the Washington Post the best leadership book of 2011. He knows what he's talking about, and he is joining forces with one of my favorite authors of all time, David Bach, from the Automatic Millionaire and a bunch of other amazing books. And they are coming out with a book called The Latte Factor, because as you know, David Bach, he coined that term, the Latte Factor, way back when, and people have been saying it and using it all the time. Oh my gosh. Honestly, I feel like when I talk to personal finance people, they always talk about the Latte Factor like every freaking day. So because it is like basically common, it's just part of our vocabulary now in the personal finance sphere. David Bach and John David Mann are co-authoring a book called The Latte Factor, out May 7th, but you can pre-order now. And we're going to be talking about what exactly is in that book so you can grab a copy, and you will want to grab a copy. I read it. I loved it. A very easy read, and it's also amazingly not just like a how-to book it's a narrative. It's like a story. You can read it and just like absorb it and see yourself in it. I totally related to the main character. It's a great read. So we're going to talk about all that good stuff in this episode. But before I get to that interview, here's just a few words about this episode's sponsor. This episode of the Mo Money Podcast is supported by Sonnet Insurance. How much are you paying for home, auto, or tenant insurance? Better yet, do you know what's in your insurance policy? If you don't know, you're not alone. In Sonnet's recent survey, they discovered that 1 in 3 Canadians haven't read their home and auto insurance policies either, which is why Sonnet stands out from other insurance companies. They've rewritten all their policy documents so you can actually understand how you're being protected without the needless jargon. And if you have questions, they're on standby via live chat, email, or give their award-winning customer service team a call to speak to a real human. Sonnet's aim isn't just to protect its clients, but to make the whole insurance process easy. Don't believe me? Visit sonnet.ca to get a quote online in just 5 minutes. It's really that easy, and one of the reasons I switched over to Sonnet myself. Try it out yourself by visiting sonnet.ca. Once again, that's sonnet.ca. Thank you, John, for taking the time to chat with me on the Mo Money Podcast. I'm excited to dive in.
Totally my pleasure. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah. So before we dive in, you have been around for a while and have quite the resume. It's kind of crazy. But for people who are just learning about you for the first time, want to give me a little bit of a background. You have a very diverse career, if I can say that. And I want to know how the hell you ended up here.
Wherever here may be.
How the hell did this happen?
What is going on? I'm really not ADD. Honestly, I'm not. But then again, my career looks a little bit like a game of hopscotch. I've kind of jumped around, and it wasn't really my intention. I never really quite knew what I set out to be. I just kept getting interested in things. So I started out in classical music. My dad was a choral conductor and a musicologist, and I performed. I was a composer. I played cello. That's kind of was my career to start. And then I got interested in nutrition and health, and I got interested in education. I started a high school. Actually, I dropped out of high school and started an alternative high school with a group of friends. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was kind of my first entrepreneurial venture, I guess. And I didn't know that's what it was called at the time, but that's when I kind of learned the limitlessness of the possibilities to what you can do if you are oblivious to the limitations that are supposed to be there. That was a long sentence. So from there, I went and I got involved in nutrition and health, as I say, and then I got involved through that in writing, and I kind of went into sales and spent about a decade very involved in sales and marketing. and then ended up being the guy that helped make other people's written stuff better. I kept editing articles and editing interviews, and eventually was editing full time and then co-writing and co-authoring. And that's when I fell into this book thing. And I've written, I should say co-authored, upwards of 24 books at this point. So that's wow. What I do. And that's how we got here.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot of books, but I guess you love what you do. Now you have a lot of books out there. What are they all kind of different topics or?
Yeah, there are a couple of main themes. The books that I'm best known for are the business parables or the personal development parables. They kind of cross over. Like the book we'll be talking about today, the Latte Factor. But 11 years ago, I wrote a book with my buddy Bob Burg called The Go-Giver. And that that kind of caught on. It struck a chord, and it came out right at the foot of the financial crash in 2008. And it took off and became very well known. It's sold all over the world, just won awards and blah, blah. And that kind of made my name and got my foot in the door of publishing in New York. And there are some sequels to that, The Go-Giver Leader, The Go-Giver Influencer. And then I've also written a whole bunch of military books with a former Navy SEAL who's a friend of mine. His memoir and a number of other memoirs of his friends, and even some business and entrepreneurial books with him, since he's become a businessman since leaving the service. Wow. And then a bunch of memoirs of other people's fascinating stories. They have people who've lived a fascinating story, but really can't write it. So I do the writing part, and it's kind of like being an actor and taking on somebody else's persona and playing them through 300 pages.
Oh, that's an interesting way to say it. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I don't know kind of what your relationship with David Bach was before or how like into the personal finance world you have been before. It sounds like you were, probably always pretty interested in it. But I mean, David Bach, he was one of the first authors that I ever read when I started getting interested in this about a decade ago. And so when I read the Latte Factor, the new book that you co-authored, it felt to me kind of like a bunch of his different books put into kind of a narrative, and it sounded like it kind of felt like it was like put together in order to be that new book for this new kind of generation. Is that kind of what the goal was? Yeah.
Well, it has a funny genesis, actually, interesting genesis for me. So The Go-Giver was the first book of mine. It wasn't my very first book, but it was the first book that really caught notice. And it came out, again, as I said, in the very beginning of 2008. So a little before the crash. And I had interviewed David for a business magazine I wrote for a year or two earlier, and I'd loved the interview. And that's where I met a lot of people that I ended up writing with. Everyone from Stephen Covey to Colleen Barrett of Southwest Airlines and all kinds of fascinating people. I interviewed David. And I loved what I was taken by, I got to tell you, Jessica, wasn't just the financial principles, which are so beautifully simple. And we'll come back to the simple theme. And so actionable, so practical, and so accessible. But I also just loved kind of his larger message, which was, he told me in that interview, he said, I believe that everyone was put here on this earth to do something unique, something that nobody else can do. And that most of us aren't doing it because we spend our lives leasing and loaning our lives. And my dream, my mission, my goal is to help people buy back their own lives so they can do what they were put here to do and live fulfilled and happy lives. And I was like, dude, this guy isn't just a money guy. He is a money guy, but he's also a life guy. I just loved his approach. So I approached a lot of people for endorsements for The Go-Giver back in 2007. David's endorsement of the book was so beautiful that it ended up on the cover. You won't find it there today because we put a new quote from Adam Grant when we did a new edition in 2015. But David's quote was just gorgeous. And he said, "Not since Who Moved My Cheese have I read a parable as much as I like for this. Read this book. It'll touch your soul and move your heart." I laughed and I cried. Something like that. It was lovely. So he approached me a few months after the book came out and said, "Hey, I'd like to do this parable. I got this idea." And his idea was very much in line with what I've believed for a decade now, which was that with a thick nonfiction book with lots of detail in it, You can reach a certain audience who are interested in that topic. But if you want to reach 100 million people, if you want to reach a lot of people, if you want your message to really get out there and touch the lives that it ought to be touching, a lot of people don't read big books. A lot of people don't read, period. And this isn't just a social media thing. A lot of people didn't read books 80 years ago. A lot of people don't read. I cannot tell you how many people have said to me in the last 10 years, I maybe read a book a year, maybe not even that. I think I've read like 2 books since high school, since college. Yep. But I read your book over a weekend. It's The Go-Giver. Mm-hmm. And, I love that. So David said, I want to reach a bigger audience, a different audience, a new audience with my ideas, but in the form of a parable like The Go-Giver. Do you want to do that with me? And I said, God, are you kidding? Of course. So we started talking about it. And I had this idea for a story about a young woman. Her name wasn't Zoe Daniels then, but I had this basic idea for a young woman, and it involved a piece of art that she fell in love with and that she wanted. But it wasn't just about this art that she wanted that she couldn't afford. There was something, deeper and bigger about her life that she wanted and she thought that she couldn't afford and that seemed inaccessible. And that kind of yearning that is behind all real stories. Somebody wants something deeply. Mm-hmm. We started writing it, and then the crash happened. And then David got busy writing some other books, and then one thing and the other, and blah, blah. And 10 years went by. And he came back. He had an evening he spent with Paulo Coelho, the author of The Alchemist, which is on just about everybody's one of my favorite books list. Beautiful parable. And he got inspired by Coelho to go back and write this book. So he approached me and said, hey, remember that idea 10 years ago? You still want to do that? It's like, oh, God, yes, I've been thinking about this for 10 years. So we finally got to write it. And we're both thrilled. We've had a blast doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I whipped through it so fast because I try my best to read the books of the authors I have on my show, but I get a lot of freaking books, and so I'm like, but big fan of David Bach, and I love the concept of the Latte Factor has always stuck with me since I first learned about it in my early 20s. I'm like, I want to see what's new or what's different about this book that is called the Latte Factor, and I read it so quickly, and I think a big reason is because it is a narrative you could just dive in and just kind of put yourself. I mean, obviously I totally related to the Zoe character because I'm like, yes, that was me. I mean, I live in a city. I definitely lived her, life when I was in my 20s. So it's very relatable. So I could, or there's a lot of people I talk to now because I'm not so much a Zoe anymore, but there's people that I know that are just like her. And so I'm like, this is very easy to digest. Yeah. And it's very reminiscent of, the first financial book I read, which is, I think it's still like the most popular financial book in Canada, The Wealthy Barber, which is a narrative. And just it's different than just like you said, there's so many financial books out there. It gets overwhelming. Number one. Number two, I think you have to be very on a kind of different level to have the motivation to go to the bookstore and pick up a, nonfiction book about how to do money. And so most people don't kind of read that stuff unless it's like one of these books that, you get recommended by a friend and you're like, it's so easy to read. You're going to find yourself in this book. You can read it in an afternoon and you're good. And that's why The Wealthy Barber has been so successful. Everyone talks about it and it's very easy to read. And so this was actually a nice, pleasant surprise because it talks about the most important things I think you need to know, especially when you're younger, and just kind of learning what are some of the key things I need to know to kind of better my financial situation. But it is like accessible for anybody. Like you can relate to Zoe or have a very different life, but the key kind of findings in the book, like pay yourself first, make it automatic, live rich now, are very easy to understand, and they're like actionable to anyone's situation, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm A, not a woman, and B, not young. And even though I wrote the book, it's like I totally relate to this. And there are baby boomers to whom honestly we did write the book for younger people, but it doesn't have to be. It's just the principles are universal; they're applicable to anybody. And there's so many good ideas. There's so many good ideas out there that work if you do them, but you won't do them. I mean, a lot of them. Because they're too complicated, or they're too inaccessible, or they're too forbidding, or they're too imposing or intimidating. We wanted to make this something that people could read, put down, and that day put into practice.
Exactly. And these are very, like, again, easy concepts, but they work. Because again, like when I read The Automatic Millionaire, I'm like, oh, what a concept, making things automatic. No one's ever told me that. No one's ever explained it like that. And that was, I feel like, probably about 10 years ago that I set up those systems, and they work because I'm way richer than I ever expected to be at this age. And it's because I didn't do anything special. I just set up some automatic transfers and stuff through my bank, and I'm investing, and you forget that you're even investing. And then you're like, oh, wow, there's a pile of money there. That's awesome. Yeah. It works. And just like you mentioned too, I think the big kind of theme of the book, which I really appreciate, is it is simple. And the thing that I keep on coming across, especially when it comes more specifically to investing, but this idea that it has to be complex. And if it's simple, maybe you're doing it wrong. And this is something that irritates the crap out of me, because I've done so much research. I've been studying this topic of like money management for 8 years now, I would say. And I keep on coming across the same concept. So I'm like, okay, I think it is actually that simple. So why are people making it so freaking complicated? What's your opinion on that? I would love to know.
I mean, isn't it fascinating when you look at someone like Warren Buffett? His principles are they incredibly complex? God, no, the opposite. I mean, they're just so dirt simple. But it's it's like one of my favorite stories is, the five frogs sat on a lily pad. One decided to jump off. How many are left? Mm-hmm. Well, the answer is there's still 5, because the one only decided to jump off. He hasn't actually done it yet. And that's the thing. It's like there are lots of great ideas out there, but will you do them? And the beauty of David's concepts for me is that people do them. I mean, he's had literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people since he started 20 years ago with the Automatic Millionaire, and Smart Women Finished Rich come back to him and say, just like you said, Jessica, it's like, oh my God, I did this 10 years ago, and here's what's happened. I've got the results. I do think that I appreciate complexity. My God, I grew up in the world of classical music where there's great complexity, but there's nothing as profound as simplicity. That's why whether it's storytelling or music or finance, you find these simple principles, and they're so universal that they last and they last and they last.
Yeah,
they work. And
I feel like, especially with finance, like I'm glad it's simple, because it does seem so complex, but it shouldn't be, because I've talked to so many guests, and we always kind of come back to this idea that, we earn money, we spend money. Why on earth does the whole management of money have to be like, oh, sorry, you need like a special degree to learn how to manage it properly?
Yes, or the stock market. I mean, the stock market. What could be simpler than the idea that when your favorite stocks start plunging, what does everybody do? They go, oh my God, and they sell. Wait.
Yep.
That's the opposite. It's like the principle is so simple. Buy when it's low, sell when it's high.
Come on. Yeah.
It's so simple, but people don't do it. But the thing about that one is that, it's people's emotions get in the way.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing about, budgets and saving and everything else. It's like the ideas are simple. Money is simple. Math is simple, but people are complicated. So finding a way to make money work when people are involved, like us, that's, I think, that's the magic of it. That's the skill of it. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. And I think the other component too is not just the emotions, but there's always so many exceptions or other things to consider. Like recently I shared a tweet that had something, pointing to an article about how to save for retirement and use RRSPs. And someone tweeted back, oh, I thought you weren't supposed to invest using an RRSP unless you made $93,000 a year. I'm like, that is a very specific rule of thumb. And I'm like, well, you can, rules of thumb are great, but you can't just be like, I'm not going to, invest for my retirement in this specific retirement account until I make $93,000 a year. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, right.
But it's like, you really need to understand what the tool is and how to properly use it. And I think that is like kind of the key thing. People are trying really hard to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But there's so many different people pointing them in different directions. It gets kind of, and then that's when they get that, analysis paralysis, as people say, and they don't do anything. They don't,
exactly.
They talk about, oh, I thought RSPs are the great, vehicle, or I heard you were not supposed to use those. And then they just don't do anything anyway.
And that's the tricky thing. It's like, yes, simplicity is so key, but simplicity doesn't mean simplistic. It's like
Yeah.
take one single piece of wisdom or directive and apply just that. No, I'm saying you have to have context. You have to have balance. You have to, have at least several principles going on that balance each other, because there is such a thing being simplistic. Like, yes, rule of thumb, but you have 4 more fingers. So,
Yes,
use those too.
Yeah. And also I think continuing to educate yourself, because there's never just a moment where you're like, well, I know it all. It's like, well, things change. My goodness, do they ever change, especially in the financial world. But also having the kind of confidence in yourself that you may do something a little bit differently. Like going back to that example, this person thought this is the right way to do it. I'm like, well, I, for example, know what you're talking about. I kind of understand you're talking about tax implications and all that stuff. But for me, I don't make that much, but I do use an RRSP. And having the confidence to basically not do exactly what you think everyone else is doing, if that makes sense. Like it's very tricky when you're trying to learn what's the right way to do it, and then just do whatever you think is right anyway.
Yeah. And, it's something interesting you said there. I think it goes to, it's simple isn't necessarily the same thing as easy or as dirt simple.
Yes.
That's very confusing what I said. But what I mean is, sometimes you have a simple principle, but you need to do a lot of research. You need to do a lot of reading, not because it's complex or not because you need to master a complicated subject, but because to do anything well, to do anything with great results, it really pays to learn a lot about it. I mean, whether it's whatever it may be. Whether it's writing or whether it's investing or whether it's finance. I mean, one of the simple principles of investing is to know the company, right? Know the principles of the company, know the state of the company. Well, that takes research. You don't just go to the company's website and say, "Oh, company looks pretty cool." So there's work involved. And sometimes implementing a simple thing, setting up a savings account or setting up a automatic payment system, that's simple. That's easy.
Yeah.
But sometimes doing simple things requires significant commitment and time and effort, because you really do need to have an understanding yourself. You need to know your topic, not like a PhD, but like an educated layman at least. And I think that's it can't be push button in terms of your own knowledge. It does pay to educate yourself.
Yeah. And like you said too, these things take time sometimes. And I think people, it's hard to kind of balance be patient, but also know when to maybe pivot. And people kind of don't know when is the time to like, maybe this isn't working. Like some people will invest for a year and be like, it's, my investments are down. Maybe this isn't the right investment. Maybe I should pivot. It's like, maybe, but it's also only been a year. Like these things do kind of take time, but you got to understand, but it's like, I think some of those fears will go away once you do continue to educate yourself and understand what those risks are and understand why these things take time or how much time you should take to see if it works.
Oh, yes. And that example you just gave, I mean, one of the factors there obviously is the noise out there, because you have, like you look at the noise of Bitcoin is going up and down, it's been down for months, right?
Yeah.
So you go online and read what I've been saying about it, and you get a chorus of voices saying it's over. And then a whole chorus of voices saying, oh, no, it just hasn't been started yet. And so you have to make a commitment to yourself that you're not going to be swayed by the noise. You can you have to sort through the noise, and you have to make a decision, which I don't know exactly how you do this. You have to make a decision who you're going to trust. Yeah. And I don't know what the rule of thumb is, honestly, Jessica, about who you're going to trust. It's intuition, maybe. It's your feeling. You have to do enough reading, enough poking around to decide, you know what, I'm going to listen to this person, but I'm going to trust this one just because it's my decision to trust him. I just feel pretty right about that. Otherwise, you can be like a piece of straw in a hurricane, just being blown all over the place.
Exactly. It really, I feel like most financial decisions, whether it's about investing or just like switching banks, really has to do with not only the research, but just, trusting yourself and kind of getting rid of that noise. Because people have opinions, probably the strongest opinions, I feel like, in finance. And for me, as when I was, starting to learn about this in my 20s, all that noise and all these opinions scared the crap out of me and made me not choose to do lots of things, because I didn't want people to say, oh, you're doing it wrong, or me actually make a mistake because I listened to the wrong person. It's like, you do have to trust yourself and then trust your gut to trust other people or the right people giving the, whatever financial literacy that they're giving. Yeah.
It's this funny thing of balancing. One of the things that makes, I think, living as an adult such a challenge is that you have to be able to embrace a certain amount of paradox and use your common sense, which in this case is, for me, I'm a writer and I spend a lot of time thinking about writing because writing is difficult and or it can be difficult. And I have two principles of writing. One is don't listen to anyone but yourself. And the other is listen to everybody. and you have to do both.
I know.
At the same time.
I know. It's just one thing that I thought was really interesting and I really appreciated while reading the book was I feel like since this term, the Latte Factor, has been circulated, so many people have different interpretations of what that means.
Yes.
And for the longest time, I felt like there was a very long period of time where lots of the financial experts in I guess the early 2000s, mid 2000s, were preaching that the Latte Factor means stop spending money on stuff that isn't essential. Live frugally. You're being selfish, blah, blah, blah. Yep. And so I definitely did that and lived super frugally in my 20s because I thought that's what that meant. But it seemed like actually in the book, it really kind of reiterates the idea that it's not about getting rid of your latte. It's about being more aware of what you're spending your money on and really understanding what your values are and your goals are, which I really appreciated because that's something I've been preaching for the past while because I can't stand this idea of stop drinking your daily coffee. It's what if it brings you so much joy and you can make it work and you can't afford it, Yeah,
it's like this is very well timed with the whole Marie Kondo movement, right? It's what brings you joy?
I know. It's true though, man. She knows some stuff.
Yeah.
I fold like her and everything now. I don't know why, but I actually do. It does bring me joy, this new folding system.
And that's what this is. You're so right. It's it's like folding money, right? Because it's about, first of all, knowing what's important to you. And sometimes people get intimidated by the word values, and sometimes people get intimidated by the word goals. But how about this? What's important to you? And what brings you joy? I thought was a brilliant way of saying this. And as you say, it's knowing where your money is going and making sure it's going where you want it to go. It's not about you can't have coffee. It's not about you can't have nice clothes. It's not about you can't have anything. You can have anything if you can, make the money to buy it. Yeah. It's about being intentional and being congruent with your spending and what matters to you.
Exactly. And believe me, when I work with financial counseling clients one-on-one, most of the time, we start off with looking at, a month's spending or 2 months spending, and we do a deep dive. And I'm like, okay, we've categorized everything. Does this make you feel good? Are you happy with what this looks like? And most of the time they're like, no, this isn't what I wanted to spend my money on. And yet here I am, spent most of my money on lunch. So it's well, we need to fix that. So it's not about you shouldn't be spending money on lunch. What a waste of money. It's if that doesn't make you feel good, then we need to do something about it.
Yeah. We had a great experience with the manuscript of the book before we even got it into the editing process at our publisher. We had people both from our literary agency and also staff from the publishing company, Atria, coming back to us and saying, "Oh my God, it just in the 3 days since I've read this, my husband and I sat down. We've already changed this. We've changed this." It's we had converts to the book before we even got it published. It was really sweet, and that's what we want to hear.
Absolutely. Another thing I really liked, and this is, again, another concept that I've been kind of sharing with people, and I love that you put it in the book, is that finance or taking care of your money is about taking care of yourself. It's about kind of self-care. Most people think, that's described in the book, the character Zoe was told, kind of like most of us, I think, growing up, it's don't be selfish, take care of other people, be a good person, don't, and I come from a Catholic background, the guilt, it runs deep in my veins. So I'm all about I have to take care of everybody and then myself. Right. But it's ridiculous. We need to take care of ourselves so we can take care of others, so we can, contribute to our community or help our friends and family. And I think a lot of people think that is the last thing that they have to do. It's really like that airport or that airplane kind of situation. I really liked that. Yeah.
It's so jarring for a lot of people, and I think I say a lot of people. It's almost like a cognitive dissonance. This idea, at one point in the book, Henry, the mentor figure, for those who haven't read it, says to Zoe, the first principle is pay yourself first. And he says, when you pay yourself first, you're really putting yourself first. And that's uncomfortable for her, which I think it would be for a lot of people. What do you mean? Put myself first. That sounds like the classic definition of an egocentric person.
Yes,
but
exactly.
As you say, the airplane example is when they go through the routine before you take off, they say in the event of emergency, put your own oxygen mask on first. And your impulse, your instinct is to put the kid's mask on first because you want to take care of them because they're your kid. But if you pass out from anoxia, you're not going to do the kid any good.
Exactly. It's like, how are they going to like survive without you?
Yeah, you can't give the world what you were put here to give the world. You can't contribute to society what you're meant to contribute to society if you're spending your entire life scrambling to pay your bills. So you got to put your financial feet in the ground. You owe that to the world around you because that's the way you can become, the full you.
It definitely seemed like one of the kind of central themes of this book, which I've found in many books since, in the past several decades. And I'm almost shocked that it's still kind of an issue, but I think it's just a big issue. It says that we're constantly busy and working and spending money. And then at the end of it, we don't really see anything. Like we're just so stuck in our little bubbles. Why do you feel like this is, I don't know. I just feel like with the internet and social media and all these advancements in technology, we'd be more aware or more educated about all this, but we're not. We're still doing the same thing that our parents and grandparents were doing. It's just this kind of rat race kind of mentality. And I mean, when she was talking about herself working in this job, 50 hours a week or so, and then always kind of feeling that pinch, I'm like, that was exactly me in my early 20s. I was exhausted.
Yes. Here's what I think. I think that, that it was always like that, but I think that what's changed most dramatically over the last couple generations is the idea that something more than that is possible has kind of lit like a match in a lot more people. I mean, in the 1940s, the 1950s, and even the 1960s, the idea that there was more than that possible was ridiculous. I mean, what was possible was retirement at the end. So when you're about to die from a heart attack, now you get to go to the Caribbean for a week. Right.
Yeah, and then die on your way back. Yeah,
that's right.
If you're so lucky.
But the idea that you could actually be in your 40s or 30s or 20s, you could spend your entire life from the earliest years on doing something you love, working, benefiting society, contributing, and also doing well financially, that could all feed itself, that could all be one congruent piece. It isn't like work now, enjoy later, but you could do it all as one integrated thing. I think that the idea that that's actually possible for a large number of people, that's a revolutionary idea. And I mean, like the 4-hour work week or that kind of idea. The Latte Factor, that's, what it's all about. But I think you're right that I think that a lot of people didn't take that from the Latte Factor, because David's been talking about Latte Factor for 25 years, right? The book just came out, but the idea has been around he's talked about it since the 90s. I think a lot of people didn't take that idea of this integration of finance and freedom. I think a lot of people took, as you say, this idea that we should stop spending on frills because we're being too luxurious and we should be more, more Victorian and more neat and tidy and take care of ourselves, be good little ants and not grasshoppers. That's not the message. The message
I'm glad because honestly, that is the message that most people have taken away from the concept of the Latte Factor.
Yeah.
In the media, that is still how it's spun. I'm like, I don't think that's what he meant.
And that's why, it was so cool. I don't want to give away the ending of the book because there really is a story to the book and there's a character. And, I will say that every time I read the book, I cry again because it's, it moves me at the end. But the central character of the story, Zoe, she gets to a good place financially, and it's not when she's 65, and it's not when she's 80. I mean, she's young, and we're talking about something that is meant to be for the here and the now and the immediate and the next few years, and not just after 40 years when you retire. Agreed,
and I think that even though kind of my generation, the millennials, I think we were told the story from our parents that is the structure of your life. It's, go to school, get a job, work said job for so many years, then retire. Like that's what I was told because that's what they knew. That's what their parents knew. Things have changed quite a bit, like you mentioned. And I feel like we're realizing this now, luckily sooner rather than later, way before retirement. So we're like, okay, maybe I can change things. Maybe I can take more risks or not stay with the same employer. Oh my gosh. I definitely felt when Zoe was talking to her mom, I'm like, yeah, I definitely talk to my mom sometimes like that, where she'd be like, oh, don't leave your job. You're so lucky. The grass may not be greener. Don't take that risk. And so I stayed at a lot of jobs for way too long that I hated. And I'm hopeful that like this book and then younger generations will have a different kind of mindset that you don't have to wait until retirement to finally go traveling or do what you want.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, please don't do that. Because believe me, I know a lot of people well, not a lot of people, but I know some people. I've heard lots of stories, kind of from, my parents, of their friends retiring and then a week later they're dead.
Yeah.
That's not good, right? Like, we don't want to wait.
But they went out with a smile in their golf cart.
Yeah.
And, it's a funny thing because with Zoe and the job, we thought about that because she could have, and I won't give away whether she quits her job and goes to a new one or she doesn't because she's being tempted by this new job. But, it's funny. We wanted to give the message that sometimes the answer is get out of this job and strike out on your own and start your own company, be an entrepreneur, or move to a different job or move to a different field. It's probably a different answer for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm happen to be somebody I've almost never held down a job. I've been entrepreneurial my whole life, but that's not for everybody. The point is we wanted to make was that you can, if you're at a job that works, great. If you're at a job that doesn't work, also great. There are things you can do to transform your life. It isn't necessarily about being an entrepreneur or about being an employee or about moving your job or keeping your job. Or, there's all those possibilities are there. But no matter what your situation is, you can create a life of significant freedom and enjoy it now. Travel now. Take photography lessons now. Take dance lessons now. Write your book now. You can do that stuff that matters to you now. It doesn't have to wait.
Absolutely. And like really now, like honestly, when I think of where I am now to where I started, lots of people are like, oh, you're lucky. And, because I work for myself now. It's like, no. It's like I took so many risks and I did lots of things that kind of scared me, but excited me. And it was very calculated too. But it's like the reason I was able to comfortably make those decisions to leave a job for another job or quit my job and just try to work for myself was because I was financially stable. I had money in the bank. I took, all these concepts in the book and applied them to my life. But I feel like one of the things that I kind of took away from that story too in the book was don't ever make a decision, like a big decision about like your career or even your money, just hearing someone else's perspective because they don't live your life. They're not in your shoes. They don't quite know. And never make a decision out of fear of like losing that job. Like this is kind of like ridiculous, but I love period pieces. And so one of my favorites is Howard's End. And I don't know if you've ever read the book or seen it, but basically there's one character who he gets some advice. He's this kind of poor guy. He works as a clerk or something for a bank or something. You think I remember this, but I don't. Anyways, he has an okay job. And he's told by some of these kind of new friends that, oh, you know what? We hear that's not a very stable company. It's probably going to foreclose. You should find another job. He takes their advice, even though they don't know much about his situation. And he quits it. He finds another job. What happens? That new job, they aren't doing so well, actually. They lay off him because he was one of the first ones or the last ones in the door. And then he's, broken out of a job. And they're like, oh, sorry. But so It's like if he had just really just like, thanks for letting me know. I'll make a decision based off the information I have that this company is fine. He would have been fine. Like that. But even though that is like from like the 1800s, is like that concept is still viable today. Like that makes so much sense, especially like when I finished university in 2009, people were just so panicked about every little thing.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. What a time. Oof.
Yeah. I know. And I used to work in newspapers too. Like that was quite the industry to be in. Not a great layoffs every week. Yeah.
Oh my God. But that's so, and that, again, that goes back to the noise out there. And the noise could just be your friends and the noise could be the entire world of the internet.
Yeah. No,
telling you what you should be afraid of. Yeah, I agree. A decision out of fear is hardly ever a good decision. Almost never, maybe never.
Yeah, it's true. I've never really made a decision out of fear that I didn't really look back. I'm like, I don't know if I needed to make that decision or whatever. But it's the other side of it is like the taking risks. Sometimes it feels like fear, but it's not. It's just like, I don't know. It's like a good fear, if that makes sense. Like I was terrified to leave my last job because my mom's like, why are you leaving your job? It's stable. You've got benefits, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, number one, I can always get another job. It's not the end of the world. If I leave, work for myself for a few years, doesn't work out, get another job. So again, that calculated risk, really kind of have your plan A, B, and C. But also you just got to kind of trust yourself in your gut and understand and really know, what are you capable of? And sometimes when you are in that kind of fight or flight situation, you'll make it work. Like, you will make it work. At least that's works for me, not necessary for everybody. But when I'm put in a situation where it's like, you need to make it work, I figure it out. I'll figure out how to make some money. Hustler and us millennials, I think. Yeah.
And I do think that, there are there are people who are more, and I don't mean to make this black and white, like two camps, but there are people who are more suited to the entrepreneurial life, and there are people who are more naturally inclined to the employee life. And they're both entirely viable. But either way, it's this, there's a one principle that applies universally to all people in any camp, and that is, it's your life, and you kind of need to be at the steering wheel of it. I mean, nobody else. You can get lots of great advice, and you can have lots of wisdom around you, but you do need to get behind the steering wheel and drive it yourself. Because even if you're an employee, you know what? You are bigger than the company you work for, because it's your entire life.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. You've got to take responsibility for your own life and your own future. And I think that's a big thing in personal finance, in my view. It's not just about, do this, here's some rules of thumb, calculate this. It's really about, and this is also a point in the book. It's like, no one's going to take care of your money. You have to take care of your money. And I think that's a big realization for people. People are like, oh, I kind of just figured my tax accountant would figure that out, or my financial advisor. It's like, no, they don't care.
I'm old enough to remember very clearly when we lived in a world where all of our parents just thought the doctors took care of us. If there's something wrong, you go to the family doctor. And family doctors still came to my house. I mean, I remember being a very, very young kid, my doctor making a house call. Well, then the 70s came, and then the 80s came, and we started realizing as a population that you couldn't leave it in the hands of doctors, that we had to start researching ourselves. And then the internet, of course, made that more possible to do, and now it's an entirely different world. Yep. It didn't make doctors obsolete, but my God, your health. No one is responsible for your health but you. And as you just said it, your wealth is exactly the same way.
Absolutely.
There's still a reason to have financial professionals, but it's your wealth health. It's your money health. It's your wealthness.
Wealthness. Ooh, I like that.
Hey, new term. We just coined it. Wealthness.
We just coined it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, John, for taking the time to chat with me. Big fan of your book, and we'll tell everybody to read it, of course, because I think it's just a good read that anyone can pick up, and I think get a little bit of inspiration to kind of make some moves, make some money moves in their lives.
Thank you so much. I love the conversation. Thank you for having me. And everybody, remember this stuff in the book. It's a story, but it's also real.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can see yourself in it. If not, you can see a family member or friend in it. That's for sure. And I think that's why it resonated so much for me. So where can more people learn more about you and grab a copy of this book, The Latte Factor?
Okay, The Latte Factor is going to be available like everywhere that you can find a book. It'll be there. You can find out more me at my website, which is just my name. It's John with an H, John, David Mann, MANN.com. All my books are there. All my stuff is there.
Fabulous. Yes, I'm going to definitely check out I may not be able to read every single book you've co-authored. There's a lot, but I'll try my best.
Pick and choose.
I'll pick and choose. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jessica. Take care.
And that was episode 190 with John David Mann. And we were talking about his new book that he's co-authoring with David Bach called The Latte Factor, which is on bookshelves May 7th. Pre-order now. But I'm going to share some details on how you can enter to win a free copy of his book when it's out in just a few seconds. Here's just a few words about this episode's sponsor. This episode of the Mo Money Podcast is supported by Sonnet Insurance. It can be pretty time-consuming collecting insurance quotes to compare prices. What's great about Sonnet is that you can do it entirely online and get a quote in just minutes. Even better, if you decide to buy Sonnet Insurance, you can do that online too. It's so easy to use and understand, it really makes insurance simple. You can even see your quote update in real time if you add additional coverage or change your deductible. So you can confidently know what's in your policy and how the cost compares to competitors. Need to see it to believe it? Try it out yourself by visiting sonnet.ca. Once again, that's sonnet.ca. Okay, as promised, so if you want to win a free copy of The Latte Factor or any of the books that I've had featured on the podcast so far, You can do that by either checking out the show notes, jessicamorehouse.com/190, or you can go to jessicamorehouse.com/contests, and there will be all the information about all the book giveaways that I am doing. And I've been doing these contests for a little while now, and I will start to be picking winners very soon. So make sure that you enter before time runs out. Now, I have got some other really exciting news that I cannot wait to share with you. However, basically, I cannot share any details until April 1st. That is the day that I can't even tell you who I'm talking about, but it's going to be amazing. I'm basically doing something very, very special coming up. I'm going to be announcing it in April, on April 1st specifically. And the best way you can find out about exactly what the hell I'm talking about, because I know I'm being very mysterious, is by, of course, listening to the podcast. But you'll always be the first to know about any exciting developments in what I'm up to. New things, events, giveaways, whatever, if you sign up to my newsletter. So just go to jessicamorehouse.com/subscribe in order to do that. But yeah, super exciting news. April 1st. Cannot wait to share it with you. And that is sadly all I can say. I'll share more on the podcast, obviously, next week. But yeah, exciting things get on the newsletter. And yeah, it'll be exciting. Another thing that I highly encourage you to do is I have a free, amazing Facebook group called the Money Life Balance Facebook group. You can find more details on my website, or just go, search Money Life Balance in Facebook. But basically there's over, I think 1,800 people now. I can't remember. But there's a good big group of us. It's been around for a couple of years now. And I just created it as a way to have a safe space where we can all talk about money, all components of money, taxes, investing, saving, whatever the case. And it is basically a great space where you can ask any of your questions. You can be American, you can be Canadian, you can be from any part of the world, join in. And you can ask your questions and just see what other people say, and also see what other people are doing with their money. But basically, the reason I created it was, as much as I love, Reddit and lots of other Facebook groups, a lot of people have a lot of opinions and they can be super judgy or just give bad information. And so I needed to create my own group so I can monitor it, so I can make sure that the information that is being kind of put out there is accurate and correct. And I usually am in there to correcting people. Or, if someone has basically kind of a negative attitude, well, bye. There's no room for you. This is a judgment-free zone. It's all about positivity and, empowering each other and learning from each other so we can all be better at money. So make sure to join the Facebook group, and I'd love to see you in there. We're always chatting in there. We share like Friday wins. It's just like a good old time. Another thing I highly recommend you do if you haven't already is, check me out on the gram. I am more active on Instagram now, and I'm actually having a lot of fun. So if you want to see what I'm up to more than, what I kind of share on Facebook or Twitter, that is where you'd find me on Instagram. And my handle is just Jessica I. Morehouse. Once again, that's Jessica I. Morehouse on the Instagram. Okay, that is it from me. Thanks so much for listening. I'm going to be back here next week with a fresh new episode of the show. So thanks a bunch. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave me a review on iTunes if you would be so kind. And I will see you back here next Wednesday with a fresh new episode.